Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who doesn't make his living waiting for the TV to tell him what to cover.
Tim Longo. I'm freelance.
You're freelance, buddy.
Yeah.
You don't wait. You don't wait around.
Make my own success.
You just grab a helicopter and fly into danger. Apparently, the military won't shoot you down. I'm not sure why not. But we decided in an unusual step to double up on our Halloween horror episodes this year with something a little more tongue in cheek, a little less scary than ghosts. I mean the enemies aren't less scary, but the treatment of the whole thing is something we'll get into. And that is by turning to, well, Tim, you should introduce it because this is one of your games.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've talked about it from time to time, and Brett knows that it's one of my favorites. Dead Rising, 2006, I think.
2006, August of 2006.
I believe it was a 360 launch title, if not very close, very early launch window.
I think it was a year later because I think it was 2005, the Xbox 360, right?
Oh, maybe, yeah. But it was one of the ones that was like, early. So
sure, yeah. I mean, Gears of War also came out in 2006. So that's another kind of early. We'll talk about those sorts of things in a minute. But yeah, definitely in that area. Not too long after it came out, less than a year, I think. I don't remember because I was kind of moving and stuff like that year, or those couple of years I was moving around a bit. So I kind of lost track of when things were coming out. But my recollection was when we were finishing Republic Commando at the end of 2004, it was like, we have to get this out because the next one is coming next year, and right. So that's just kind of my touch point for that stuff.
And then ironically, I had taken a year off, and then so I vividly remember this game also because I had just started at Crystal Dynamics.
Right. Okay.
And I remember playing it in the office on, newly acquired 360s or whatever. And us, obviously this, and for different reasons than Gears of War, but this and some other games were, and in fact, Crystal at the time was working on the Tomb Raider Legend, up-resed version of Tomb Raider Legend for 360, which was the better version.
Right.
From the PS2. And so, this was one of the games because of its character count that everyone was, wanting to see, and its structure and stuff, which we'll talk about. So yeah, there's always those titles that launch, and in the office, everyone kind of gathers around. Can't talk. We're both tired. Yep. Gathers around and looks at the game, dissects it, assesses it. At the time, HD, right, was like a thing.
Oh yeah,
and then sure. This had kind of a big / not very big controversy of its font size, if you remember, because it was HD and the font was too small to read from on your TV.
Oh wow, okay.
Far away.
Yeah, so I'm playing the remaster that's on the PS4, so I do not have that that issue because
they fixed it. I think they even fixed it.
I mean, I played it. They may have patched it in because I did play it on the 360 back when I was working at Bethesda. I think it was in the company's library, and I borrowed it, for a couple of weeks and tried it out. I didn't get that far, though. I'm seeing things. I'm like, oh yeah, that I forgot about that. Because
such a weird game.
Yeah. It's such a weird game, and I'm sort of like, I'm definitely taking it. Kind of with a grain of salt as far as how seriously I'm taking it, in a different way than I would have back then, which would have been much more like, I gotta do this, I gotta beat this thing or whatever. And this has been kind of more like, or also like the completionist, like I gotta save everybody every run, and that doesn't feel like the right thing to do, but we can talk about that.
That is exactly the tension of this game. It goes against all the norms that you assume for
right.
For the
game. I've already left somebody to die who I'm like, I know I have to save this person or they're toast. I guess they're toast this run. Oh well.
So, yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, in any case, a little bit about its details. It is a Capcom product. We've played a few Capcom games. This is from producer Keiji Inafune, who is most well known as originally the character designer for the Mega Man series, and then ultimately the sort of producer. I'm not sure what the roles are at Capcom, but he is generally the one associated with Mega Man at this point, and of course this franchise, and as well as Onimusha, which are three kind of big Capcom series that he's been involved with. I think he has a direct hand, and of course we've also played, and we'll contrast this with the Resident Evil series, which is Shinji Mikami. Back then, not anymore, as he moved on maybe a decade ago. Any case, so that's really kind of all I know about Capcom in 2006. I mean, just kind of what I looked up briefly. And of course, we've played some Mega Man. Not enough for some people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Barely scratched the surface, one might say.
Yeah. Oh, 2006 in video games. I've already mentioned a couple of titles. It's a kind of late for us. I remember, back in the first couple of years when we were starting this podcast up, like we did one in 2005. We're like, man, that might be the latest we ever play. But we have slightly stretched it out from there. And so far, the only title we've played from 2006 is Dwarf Fortress. And I kind of put an asterisk behind that because it's like, well, we played, 2006's Dwarf Fortress a little bit rather, but we played a lot more of whatever 2023's Dwarf Fortress. So I'm not sure I would really categorize, Dwarf Fortress as a 2006 title for us. And really that's it. So it is not, it's not a year that we've played a lot of games from, even though there are some games on the list that I'm about to rattle off that, or something we would maybe consider playing, or we've mentioned in the cast. So I will blast through them, jump in if there's anything you want to say at any point. But we have Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Okami, or Okami, I'm not sure how people pronounce that, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Final Fantasy XII, a favorite of mine in the series, Guitar Hero 2, Rainbow Six Vegas, which we both played co-op a bit back in the day when it came out, New Super Mario Brothers, so this is also the era of the Wii, Elite Beat Agents, which was a DS title that a rhythm game I really quite enjoyed, as well as Brain Age, which I have both of those games, Burnout Revenge, Gears of War, more of a Xbox 360 thing, Call of Cthulhu, Dark Corners of the Earth, which I think we've mentioned before on the game, on the cast rather, because it's got an early level that a lot of people really like, and a general vibe. I think that's fun. Condemned Criminal Origins, another launch, sort of window title that I've played and actually found the audio design really extremely good in that series. Tomb Raider Legend, Heroes of Might and Magic 5, which I mentioned, of course, because we recently played the first one, and Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, which is a precursor to Prey and Dishonored and things like that. So I throw that one in there, mostly because we played Prey. But I thought I would mention that one. I think that is the first one from Arcane, was Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. I might be wrong about that. They might have had one before that. Anyway, so that kind of sets the tone for 2006. A lot of early 360 titles. The Oblivion came out on both PC and 360. That year, I remember it was, go big, go early as far as RPGs go. Final Fantasy XII was a PS3 favorite of mine. And you've got it on something, Switch maybe. So it's there.
And it's there. It's Mark. I think Mark got it for me. Was it?
I think
12 or 10.
I think it was 12. The 12, Zodiac Age.
Yeah. The Zodiac Age. Yeah.
12. 10 is the one with Titus, and then it has the sequel with the.
If you say so.
Yeah, I do say so. I do say so.
The 12 is the one that was connected to Tactics, the same world or something.
Oh yeah, it is the same. It's Ivalice, and I've talked often about the AI in that game and how you can program your party to respond in various ways, and how much I enjoyed that. You give them a kind of behavior tree kind of style, instructions, which is cool. But with that said, I mean, any connections you draw from those? I mean, I see like early Wii titles and early 360 titles as being kind of the biggest thing, and with the DS having a really large market already, you're seeing some of the kind of more offbeat, stuff that was on that system, Elite Beat Agents, and Brain Age being a couple I picked out just because I was like, oh yeah, I remember those, the goofy games. Also Electroplankton, which was like a musical toy DS game, came out this year, and stuff like that. So it's it's kind of a interesting period for Nintendo as well.
Yeah, strange times. I mean, the reason I think it was originally a Xbox 360 exclusive, and then or a timed exclusive. I feel like. Mm-hmm. So I mean,
I think it was an exclusive. It was console exclusive to I don't think it came out on PS3.
Right at the time. Okay, yeah. I mean, I think eventually it does come out.
It comes out on the PS4
or something.
Correct. Yeah, in the remaster. Yeah.
So I just
which is
the
how
point
I'm
being,
playing it.
It was, again, 360 around 360 launch era, right? It was like the next generation. If everyone remembers, we've talked about probably before, but Xbox sort of their strategy there, which people would argue worked, is that they, basically skipped. They came out early, basically tried to beat PlayStation to the punch. And so there was a moment when 360 was, well beyond PS2, and PS3 had not come out yet. And so these games, Gears, I'm sure Forza would have been around there someplace too. Forza was probably a launch title, in fact, that came out.
That might have been the prior year.
But this one, not as we play it, it won't be necessarily for like graphic fidelity per se, but like number numbers of entities, world structure, those sorts of things, destructibility, all the sort of systemic aspects of it. It was kind of a bit of a showcase kind of game, as opposed to say a Resident Evil, which is more haul crawl kind of zombie game, right? Which wouldn't have shown off the system as much unless it was like a high fidelity play. And this was like throw numbers at the screen and, oh my God, I can't believe how many zombies there are. Oh my God, I can't believe I can go wherever I want to. Those sorts of very like 90-degree turn from Resident Evil for Capcom. And also because it was coming from a different creator within Capcom, from Mikami or whomever else, right? So
right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. And I just, like I've already said, I appreciated it for its different structure. But there weren't, I'm trying to think of other, open world was still a, trailblazing genre, I think, still at this point.
For sure. I mean, Assassin's Creed the original would have been around this time, so either probably the next year. Don't quote me on that. I don't recall exactly, but that's kind of my vague recollection. There was a lot of kind of like, oh, look what we can do with the power of these machines. I mean, this was, for me, it's an era where programming for consoles becomes even more complex, because you still have constraints, but now you have harder to develop for architectures, and that's really how 360 beat the PS3. I mean, what tends to happen in these console wars is they trade back and forth because one wins a generation and then has all this hubris of like, well, we know what we're doing, and they come out with something and they're like, they'll just the famous quote about the PS3 from internal hardware development was like, well, people will just learn how to use it. It's the PlayStation, and because it was hard to program for with multiple CPU and these SPUs, special processing units. The 360 was, basically a Windows machine with, some a little bit more complicated hardware. It was multi core as well. 3 cores, 6 hyperthreads, and so it was a whole thing to maximize performance on it as well. But it was a little more approachable. It was more like a PC. This is also an era where I think you see a lot of PC developers getting more into, and the original Xbox is kind of where the PC players start moving more into consoles as well, because they become a little more approachable, and especially the 360, I think, for PC developers. My recollection anyway.
Yeah. And we won't cover it on this game, but of course Xbox Live was huge for 360 specifically.
Yeah, it had come out in 2004, I believe. 2004, is that right? No, it must have been earlier than that, because Halo was Xbox Live, so it was way earlier than that.
Halo 2, yeah.
And then Halo 2 was a huge deal. That's right, Halo 2 was
Xbox Live. Yeah, Halo 1 was
launched. Halo 1 was just LAN and couch. That's right.
But arguably, people, the trailblazing was there, but Halo 3 on 360, is sort of like where
I see.
We saw the potential. Everyone saw oh my gosh, Xbox Live, this concept of having an account. But again, it doesn't apply as much to this game. But the other big thing that was one of the fun things for me with this game was achievements, and the 360 leaning so heavily into that, which does kind of connect to the Xbox Live topic of your persistent account, and this concept of retaining your achievements over multiple games.
Yes. What's your GamerScore, Tim?
My GamerScore is only like 16K. I was just looking at it because I don't really exclusively play on one system.
Yeah,
Steam is probably higher than anything else, to be honest. But yeah, 16K, I think. But I thought I actually had gotten more achievements. I went back to look at this game, and I'm only did half of them, so about around 500 score. So.
Well, now's your chance to finally make that right.
Well, and I think that'll come up, right, because of the structure of the game. In order to get the achievement, to get 1,000 points, you have to play the game very differently than a lot of other games. So,
right, yeah, and for those who are not console players or don't know about GamerScore and all that, GamerScore is the accumulated value of all your achievement points. And an Xbox title had. I don't know if there was like a lower number for smaller games like indie games or Xbox Live Arcade games. But for a mainline title, shipped in a box, it was 1,000 points per title. So
yeah.
And then DLC could add to that.
Right. Yeah, there were limits for Xbox Live Arcade games and DLC.
Yeah. I don't remember what they were, but they were like half or a tenth or whatever. So for sure. All right, and that was kind of a whole big thing. If you want to go back and see Chris Hecker's talk about achievements, you can do that. Achievements considered harmful? ? I believe is the title. It was a GDC talk back around this time. So I don't remember what year it was, but that's one to look into. If you're curious about that. We've talked about it a little bit at times. I like them when they push you a little bit to discover things that weren't otherwise there or otherwise visible to you. Like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Like, with this game, I could see like using all the. I tend to forget that he has sort of just like moves he can just do, even though you get them like every few levels, you get a new quote unquote skill. Which is basically just a way you can jump on zombies or kick them in the face or, whatever. And I tend to forget I can do those things because it's, I'm more about picking up weapons and things like that. So it is useful to have achievements that kind of point you at other ways you can have fun with games. I don't tend to love the ones where it's like kill a billion, whatever, because who wants to do that?
Yeah. And that this game has those.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure you have the opportunity to kill a billion whatevers in this game. Let's talk a little bit about the structure. I guess the game structure flow, because it is different and it is something that really attracted you to it. And so I will throw it to you because you're kind of leading the charge on this stuff. Also, my favorite source.
Well, I mean, I think that obviously the bringing up Dark Souls will happen. Bringing up roguelikes will happen. And the reason, so you start the game out and, essentially once you start, it gives you a message that you have 72 hours to make it back. So you're flying on a helicopter in the beginning of the game. And also, by the way, Brett hasn't mentioned it, but there was another reason we thought about playing this game too, in that we just got off of a horror game that was related to photography.
Right.
And photography is also a big deal in this game. We'll talk about it probably more in future episodes. But he's a photojournalist taking photos as part of the mechanics and systems of the game. They rank you on them, etc. And so when you're flying in a helicopter, they actually introduce you to that, and you're actually shooting photos from the helicopter. You start seeing the point system and stuff. But once you land, it says, okay, the helicopter's coming back 72 hours. And so it's sort of like, there's a world clock happening. And in fact, you have a watch on your wrist that you can access at any time. And it's not real time, but it does tick down in a time pacing that is relative to the game. And, the idea is to do what you can, take the photos you can, document the situation, go do the quests, as we'll discover over time, and other things that will pop up that I won't spoil yet if you haven't played it, and get back to the thing. But as we talked a little bit about in pre-show, it also has an RPG light elements where you are leveling up. Brett just mentioned it too. And so as you are both taking photos and taking down zombies, saving survivors, which we'll get to later too, you're leveling up Frank West, who is the main character, the protagonist, such that he is.
Yeah.
Piece of work. And in fact, there's some pretty problematic aspects of the game too that I believe they tried to remedy in the new remaster. But
yes, as we speak, on September 19th, which is when the game starts in the original.
Oh, funny. I didn't notice that.
It came out on the deluxe remaster, which is a full, a more full remaster rather than just sort of a texture up-res.
It's like $60 game.
Yeah. It's a full remake, a deluxe remake, remaster thing. Came out on September 19th, which, is like the first day in the game. The day you arrive in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, I guess. I don't know. I've already forgotten.
Willamette. There's a Willamette
right.
here too in Washington, but it's, although I think they're personally pronouncing it wrong, but yeah.
Isn't it Willamette?
But I think he says Willamette or something.
Yeah, they do. In the game,
the pilot. But anyway, so you have this clock ticking down. But once you die, you're able to retain your XP, which is called PP, prestige points, I think.
Correct.
And then there's this kind of, the reason I brought up roguelikes is that there's this sense of like chipping away and kind of leveling up and kind of coming back. Because as an example, again, we'll get into the deeper systems of the survivor stuff later, but just as a quick example, there's survivors that will be trapped someplace, and you have a limited time that is given in your quest, your mission, that you can access via your watch or the watch interface to save them. And if you don't save them, they will die and they will be dead, and you can't do anything about it that day, that round, that playthrough. But then once you die, I think you can manually restart if you want to at some point too. That might be possible. You basically retain your stuff, your stats, and then you can go in and you start over that 72 hours, right? And so you kind of, it's very Groundhog's Day in that way. And so if you do want to do everything or be really good at the game, or kind of like the power curve of the game, you have to play through the 72 hours multiple times. And it was just such a fascinating approach. And, there could have been, in fact, Inafune and others might have even admitted to this at some point, but there's definitely some creative aspects to that. But I would also say there's some production aspects to it as well, especially at the time, of ways to systemically leverage your content, right?
Sure.
It's a typical RPG element. We talked ad nauseum about it with JRPGs and grinding, and clearly a lot of debate about that in our community, which you won't be able to talk me out of probably. Yeah, so there's sort of a grinding element to this game. And I just found it, being a Resident Evil fan back then, but also, having something come out with such a different structure and this concept that, my memory of it was very divisive as far as like, some people don't really like to play content over again,
Yeah.
And it was very like controversial. I think you either loved this game or you hated it. And I actually, when I'm playing it on PC. You're probably playing on PS4, right?
I'm playing PS4, yeah.
Yeah. So when I looked at the Steam page for I guess 2016 version, maybe, or whenever this remaster came from, I think it was 2016. So it's still the same structure of the game. It's not the new one, but the Steam page actually the reviews are still very positive. Like, I was actually surprised because I remember it being a very controversial kind of game because of its structure. But I think it's also become a little bit of a cult classic. That's probably why they did a new remaster, a second remaster, because I think it's a pretty special game and pretty bold. And then on top of all of that, which I'm glad we're playing this version, because I can imagine the new version has changed some of the usability of this. You can only save your game when you're going through a 72-hour chunk at couches or bathrooms. And so there's this push your luck, risk reward of getting from one point to another during the 72 hours. If you're trying to save a survivor or do something, of getting to those save points, similar to Resident Evil, but in Resident Evil, the structure is different, and, the tension's different and the difficulty's different. So those typewriters have a different, I think, still similar, but, yeah. And then the last thing I'll mention is that the structure of the world is largely open. There's definitely some locked off areas through the story,
right?
But I would call it hub and spoke technically, but it's sort of semi-open world, and then I can go to the different districts. Oh, and we didn't even talk about in pre-show, but Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah,
it's also Chopping Mall, although that's robots basically, but.
Yeah, but Dawn of the Dead, being the sort of like, spiritual sequel from Night of the Living Dead, took place in a mall.
Correct. And, they went to where they loved in life.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of a classic, zombie movie from Romero, right? George Romero. And then Day of the Dead comes after that, which I don't remember where that takes place. Another house?
I think that's a military base.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they've got a chopper.
Is that the one where they train the zombie?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Chuck? I don't remember his name.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as a kid, I remember watching Dawn of the Dead and just loving the concept of a zombie situation happening in a mall. And that was I'm just thinking of this now, but to be honest, I think that probably was another thing for me. It's like, Resident Evil, I'm going to old houses and science bases and, villages in Spain or whatever. It's like, okay, that's fine. But what if I could go to a mall and have it be completely overrun? That sounds fun. So,
yeah, I mean, not only that, I mean, it's overrun. Yeah. So there is a sort of technical achievement, which really was a big achievement, and
there are a lot of zombies on
there are a lot of zombies on screen, and how you do that, is a magic. It's kind of lost to me. I'm not sure. I have some ideas because we talked about at a studio I worked for. We talked about a sort of similar kind of game. We talked about how we would do it, but we never built the tech. We didn't get it funded, so I don't know if it would have worked. But it's heavily sort of instance based, where you'd have to be able to sort of have layers that you can sort of recolor or turn off and on and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know how else you would be able to do it. You basically have to have, only a couple of models that you can kind of turn on features basically on them, through sets of bits or something. Is a guess, total guess. it is super cool, and it does sort of, it's one of those things that showcases like, oh wow, this is how things can look, in that next generation. One of the things that Tim Ramsey said to us, on Republic Commando, he was the graphics programmer, was, well, when we go to this next console, you can have a lot more enemies on screen if they're the same level of complexity as we have, in our original Xbox game, right? If they're sort of similar in polygon and bone count, right? And, texture passes or whatever, draw count, I guess is what you'd say. And, I mean, that's clearly true. Like, there's a lot more draw capacity here. And, a lot of them are probably not, doing much. Like, they don't have any, only the ones kind of near Frank are going to have anything, any sort of real behavior. Otherwise, they're just kind of playing an idle and kind of moving towards walls and, kind of meandering or whatever. They're not really doing anything. Excuse me. But as you kind of wake them up, you get this kind of big crowd of them possibly after you. And it's really compelling, technically speaking. It's just like, oh, wow, there's so many things on screen. It wasn't the first time we'd seen something like that. Freedom Fighters had something similar. They're a lot lower detail. And that was an original Xbox game, I believe. So it's...
PlayStation 2 as well.
Yeah, and PlayStation 2, right? So, these sorts of things were possible. But, this is a lot more fidelity even in the original version. I'm playing a remaster now, but even in the original, I remember it being like, wow, that's a lot of zombies in there. You can tell they're zombies, like they're not just kind of blobs on, formless blobs on screen. So it's pretty good stuff.
Well, and the other cool thing about it that I thought that I always appreciated about the sort of like synergy of it all is, and of course the mall itself is a fairly simple geometry wise and such. It's a fairly simple space, and they've broken it down into districts essentially that are connected right through loads. So that helps. And if you go, like, for instance, out into the Central Park kind of like outdoor area, it's a very simple thing, so throwing, they chose to put their budgets into the characters. But the other cool thing about it is that one of the aspects of the gameplay of moving through the mall is about the horde. Right. It's about, because they grab onto you and they try to hold you. And, if there's, too many kind of in a cluster, it's sort of like you're going to navigate differently. It teaches you to behave differently as you're moving through the space based on how they're clustered. You kind of look for openings like you would if you're playing football or something, right? It's like you're going to try to go through the pocket, as they say, or what have you.
Wow, that's the most I've ever heard you say.
I know. I get
a sports game. Wow.
Again,
normally it's just blah blah sports ball, but here we are. Like, you're in the pocket.
I used to watch football back in the old days, and so anyway, I play dumb a lot on that one, on that topic.
Yeah, I'm aware. I'm aware of your performative sports ball.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's technically interesting and cool, and it's like, of course, it's a zombie horde game. The movies that it's inspired by have a lot of zombies, and you want that fantasy fulfillment. But I just think there's also a gameplay element to it where if you want to survive, and to your earlier point, some of the abilities you get start leaning into the fact that there's hordes. Like, you can headwalk at one point. I think you get stats for how easily you can wiggle through them as well. So you're kind of less friction. As far as them grabbing onto you and stuff.
Frank is oily enough.
Yeah, exactly. I just think it's just a kind of a nice, marriage of all of those things kind of coming together. The sense of going through, wouldn't work if there wasn't a lot of zombies in a given area. And the sense of running through them, just one simple example I wrote in my notes is, if you're trying to get from point A to point B, you always, from one district to another, you're always going to need to go through a door to get the load. And that door is often surrounded by zombies. Yeah. And so there's this tension of like, okay, I have to go through them to get to that door. I can do that with, I can take as many of them out as I can by using weapons or a lawnmower or something, or a grenade. But I also, if I don't have those stuff, I really have to like lure them away, try to find an opening, and then sneak through and then hit the load or whatever. But you could get grabbed along the way. So it's just, it's where tech and art and fantasy fulfillment and gameplay all kind of come together, and those are always, I really appreciate those sorts of moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is the sort of, definitely Dawn of the Dead is the campier movie, right? I mean, it's meant to be goofier, it's still a horror movie, people are still going to die and all those things, but it's not the extreme tension and fear of Night of the Living Dead, as you pointed out, right? That's a way scarier, deliberately scary movie. This definitely has, the Dawn of the Dead has that kind of more campy feel, and I would make the same distinction between Resident Evil and Dead Rising. Dead Rising is definitely the shopping mall version, fittingly, because it's set at a shopping mall, but it has the same feel to me as Dawn of the Dead, as you point out, of just like the kind of goofiness and there's a sort of social satire, I guess, of that movie, and then they can use the fact that they've got all these different zombie types to sort of motivate some of the things that happen in the world. For example, occasionally there'll be a zombie that was a security guard or something, and they'll drop a baton, if you knock them down and things like that. So it's also another way to sort of introduce, weapons or flavor into the world, that might not be there otherwise. Then, of course, the whole, you can pick up almost anything and use it as a weapon, is a lot of fun. And you just kind of wield it till it breaks, and then you move on to the next one, and you determine how many things you're going to, you have a certain number of things you can carry. And I don't know if there's like things that you can only carry one of because they're too large, like you can't put it in your back pocket or not. Like I don't know that I've tried with like benches to try to store a bench for later.
I don't think you can. I
don't think you can have like 3 chainsaws in your inventory or something like that. I think there are certain items that are like, okay, you're carrying this, or you put it down to use something else. That's in your
and
inventory.
You can throw everything. But right. The concept that everything is, you can pick up. In fact, the cover of the box, the poster, is him with a TV.
Oh, right, yeah.
That he's thrown, he's going to smash on the head of a zombie, right? So it's kind of like the signature, which I think is from one of the films. Like, I feel like I have a memory of that. But then I think the inventory system's elegant, right? It's just very simple, fairly not diegetic, but it's like you can put anything in the slots other than the bigger items. So food, right. If you want to carry more food, that's going to take up a weapon slot. If you want to carry more weapons, vice versa. So,
or you can find books.
Right.
That have sort of power-ups, and if you're carrying them, you have that power-up basically. Which is a cool thing too.
Really cool thing, yeah. And
I was surprised, like, well, I found a book that does this to me. How do I use it? And I'm like, oh no, I just carry it. So that was a cool moment of learning, of like, oh, okay, I see how this works.
As Harley would say, someone from our team, our design director at our company,
who has been on the podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. She would say, the player needs to make hard decisions about what to keep with them. And that's, I like that stuff. I'd forgotten about the books. I haven't found one yet, but
there's one.
But also, I believe there's
basically the first area.
Durability, right? There's durability on weapons too. So there's also that kind of constant. You're going to constantly be. But I don't remember the specific build, if you could even call it that, but my inventory set. But when I'd played back in the day, because I did play a lot of hours of this, I'll have to go back and see if it did track that. But, it'll like a little bit like Dark Souls or whatever. Like there's this sort of like routine you get into where every time you go through a run, you have this sort of set of things you're looking for that is your ideal favorite combo, right? Like I want this food item, I want this book, I want these 2 weapons. And then I will just constantly rinse and repeat that set because I've basically optimized the way that I play for this XYZ. So it is, and that's kind of where some of the roguelike elements of it come from, or come into play as well, right? It's like, okay, I'm really getting to know. In fact, I think I wrote it down. I didn't text you. That as soon as I started the game, I had this sort of visceral memory of the mall.
Yeah.
That I was like, okay, yeah, I know exactly where to go, because you're replaying it so much. You're really, as we talk a lot about on the podcast, you're kind of learning the world and memorizing the world, and it's like information is the real. What was the phrase?
Knowledge is the real reward.
Yeah, knowledge. Yeah, and this game structure is very much built around knowledge, right? It's like, where, like you said, the police officers will drop, if you want those clubs, then you want to look for.
You don't really want those clubs, but
yeah, you don't. But like, I think some of them also.
I picked one up because I was like, oh, I haven't seen that before, so it's
Yeah. And then some of them have
in a pinch,
on, I think. Yeah.
In a pinch, it's like, oh well, if I'm running low on stuff, then look for one of those, because I'll be able to pick up at least something to hold me for a minute. So, plus you get to know, and it's you kind of know a lot about the mall to begin with, because you start with a map of the mall, which is like a "you are here" type mall kiosk that would have a map on it, from back in the day. They probably still do. I can't remember the last time I was in a mall. So it's got that kind of look of like, oh, there's these kind of districts of the mall, as you kind of pointed out. There's a food court, there's whatever, and it feels like one of those games where you really get to know, like, okay, when I'm in here, I want to drop into this bookstore because I know there's a bookstore, and I'll go in there and get that, and then I'll swing across and 2 down and go into the sports store and get myself a hockey stick.
Yeah, exactly.
And sort of like build up your knowledge of each space as you're passing through it, of like, okay, as I make my run, other games I thought of this week playing this were like Deathloop, like where you're learning more about how to tackle the game. Not a game that I've played, but that I heard discussed a lot at work when it came out.
Yeah, I did start it. Yeah, and it is. I mean, that's definitely the concept of that. I haven't finished it yet, but it is that rinse and repeat and memorize, and then each day. The one thing that they have that is different from this one is that it's sort of like things change as you wake back up after you die. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's weird. That's an interesting game. It's a very fascinating structure in that game. Almost too fascinating as far as like, trying to do something super different. This one I think is nice in that, yeah, we'll get into it later, but I think the survivor, if you are somebody who is incentivized and wants to save survivors, we'll talk about it more as we go, but it's a really interesting layer of the game that kind of motivates you. Like, I guess, I guess I'd like to watch. I look at YouTube and see if there's any, like, what a speed run looks like. Like, I'm sure there's like a Dead Rising,
any percent,
any percent, but like one run playthrough or something. I don't know if that's possible. I don't remember how the story structure goes, but imagine that it is, because it is probably possible. But if you want to save a lot of people or whatever, right, you're going to be playing the game multiple times, and you're going to remember these names, right? You're going to see these people, and you're going to be like, oh, right. I just have this really vivid memory that really definitely is a blessing and a curse, because it can be very controversial. But I have this really vivid memory of, like, on a certain run, having a plan about how I'm going to save, who I'm going to save, in what order, and then almost getting one back, and then them dying at the last minute, and just that feeling, and that's where the save system comes into to some degree too. But yeah, it's just a really, Groundhog's Day, right? It's just that kind of concept. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm already discovering things, that are systemic when I play based on those plans that I'm making. So you start, I think you're directed, you have to go up to the roof anyway. You go up there and get the couple up there, and you bring them back immediately. It's kind of like the big, cheap, like 30,000 prestige points. So like every time, it's like 5,000 for each of them. I think you can also take there are points, and we'll talk more about camera mechanics later, but there are points where you can take a picture and get a lot of points if you take it at just the right moment. There's a character who introduces you to that mechanic, who is actually who I'm about to talk about. I would then go into the mall, the first area that you go into, and there's a story mission that you're supposed to follow with this guy, Carl, and you have to cross that big interior courtyard, outdoor courtyard, enclosed by the mall, and go to the other side so you go, as you were pointing out earlier, you go out a door, so you have to get to that door, and then you get to the other one. It's like, oh man, that door's surrounded. And that's where the lawnmower is. So you get to see like, oh, okay, this is this kind of game. But one of the things I discovered is there's a guy who is available to be saved in that first area who's also taking pictures. Mm-hmm. But his mission doesn't actually pop until you leave that area. So like there was one time I'm just waiting. I'm like killing zombies, just kind of idly, walking around killing zombies whenever there's a few kind of peeled off, and like it's still generating more. They're just generating them constantly. But I was like up to 200 zombies. I'm like, this is weird. Pretty sure this thing popped pretty early last time, huh? And then I go outside and I'm halfway across the park and it's like, oh, there's a guy. And I'm like, oh, which is also kind of a little weird because it's like there's a mechanic there that they want to teach you, but you have to go back and save that guy to learn the mechanic if you haven't already figured it out. So I don't know. It was just kind of funny. Like they want you to go do the story thing, but they want to, as soon as you leave that area, to go do the story thing. Like, oh, you missed the guy. It's like, it was like, they're definitely playing with you. I guess is the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Yeah. And it's, the other point, like the game opens, once you get into the mall, they have barricaded it out, and then there's a very tone setting scene where this elderly woman is looking for her dog Madonna, and Madonna ends out in the horde outside of the mall, and she opens the door, breaks down the barricade to get to the dog, and of course that's how the zombies get in. So it's
the zombie dog.
Very funny kind of situation that
it's always the humans you have to worry about in the zombie movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just, and so, but the point I was going to make there is that once they come in and they basically introduce like, okay, you have to run through these zombies to get to the next section, which is like up the stairs. As you're doing that, immediately as the game starts, you see all these notifications that X person dies, all
these people died,
Y person dies, Z person dies. It's like bam, bam, bam. And it's like, oh, wait, what? And so there's this sort of sense of like, could I have done something? I definitely couldn't this time.
But they're telling you it's important to save people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, okay, next time, what do you do? Like how does that work? So it's just this concept is introduced very early, and I think in a very punch you in the face kind of way, in a cool way. So yeah, it's just such a weird game. Such a weird game.
Yeah, that's probably where we should leave it. Yeah, such a weird game, and we'll talk more about it next week as we continue the series. Let's turn then quickly to email. We're trying to make it a short one this week because we're both exhausted, and I'm a little under the weather besides. So let's turn quickly to email. We do have a couple, and these were sent, of course, to devgameclub@gmail.com. Go ahead, from a former guest. You have the first one, sir.
Yes, this was a nice surprise. Hello from your episode number 400 guest, Tony Rowe. Hello, Tony. Guten Tag, mein Herren. Demon Tag.
Demon Tag.
He wouldn't have known that maybe at this point.
He did, yes. That's what it's about. Read the mail.
Okay. I was catching up on your Fatal Frame episodes, and you had some questions about the ritual of Demon Tag. Demon Tag. No, it isn't. It isn't in German. Instead,
it wasn't in German, Tony. That was a bit.
Instead, it is a reference to an old Japanese game of tag called Onigokko. Oni being in there for demon, as I'm sure you know. And Oni is a mythical creature that often translates in English to demon or ogre. In Onigokko, one player is the Oni, much like the it in tag, who tries to tag the other players. Just like in the Western game of tag, there are many rules variation and different ways to play Onigokko. I first learned about Onigokko back in the 80s watching the comedy sci-fi anime Urusei Yatsura, usually translated to those obnoxious aliens. In the first episode, Earth is threatened with invasion by aliens that have many traditional characteristics of mythical Oni, with sharp horns and teeth and wearing clothes made out of tiger skin. The aliens agree to a contest of champions between them and the humans, with the fate of Earth on the line. What type of contest do they choose? A game of tag, of course. Onigokko! Thank you, Tony A. Rowe, former guest and team member from Trespasser. Go listen to that series, including his interview. And yes, he was on for our 400th episode. So thanks for writing in, Tony.
Yeah, and I guess in Japan, even the kids' games have lore. I have nothing more to add to that.
Yes, big into the lore reasons. Did I forget to mention? I don't think I read. Thanks for being my latest podcast addiction. I think I skipped right over.
Yeah, that. I think you skipped right over that. Yeah, the first line was.
Well, thanks for listening, Tony.
Plenty of episodes to catch up on there, Tony. Glad to have you aboard. I'll watch for those, early episodes having one listen this month in the stats. I have a longish email here from Artimage. I guess I'll try to read all of it here. Sorry, my throat is getting a little sore. Artimage. So at some point I may just be like, okay, and the gist of the rest is, anyway, the subject is Artimage Extra Life 2024, Macraft. Hello, devs, and especially hello to the amazing supporting community of the DGC audience. It is Artimage again, here to tell you about this year's efforts for Extra Life, raising money for McMaster Children's Hospital here in Hamilton, Ontario. Sadly, this isn't going to be anything as extreme as you may be used to me from the last few years with liver damage, brain cell death, searing the taste buds off my tongue, and gastrointestinal distress. I'm not moving beyond those things, just taking a bit of a break this year. For those who are not familiar with what the heck he's on about, he used to do a Dark Souls run where every time he died, he would take a drink, and he would try to do this over the course of 12-ish hours. So this year is a break from that. This year, returning to the letter, Artimage wants to give the community, both DGC and his broader audience, a chance to join in. On Saturday, November 30th, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern, Artimage will be playing a simple game of Minecraft, and you're all invited to join in.
Oh, cool.
I will start a realm, and people are welcome to come join and leave as they can and are interested in. And people all over will have the chance, because while I'm telling you the time for my local time zone, this will be a 24-hour event minimum. Because when I hit certain milestones, we will be adding hours, maxing out at 48 hours. That's right, 2 days. Okay, maybe it isn't just a relaxed game of Minecraft after all, given we're up for an endurance run. Artimage has 3 goals with this event. 1, reach the end game in Minecraft. I've never done this before. 2, be the #1 fundraiser for McMaster Children's Hospital. 3, include as many people taking part as I can. If you wish further information, please follow his social media, Artimage84, on all the things, or listen for the announcements on his streams on the same channel on Twitch. And you can reach out via DMs in the Discord, or send an email to artimage84@gmail.com. Which should be in the show notes. And he's saying sorry for the extra work. That's not a huge deal. The Dev Game Club community has been a fantastic part of my support in these endeavors in the past 2 years, and I hope I can count on you all, be it just sharing, lurking in chat, helping me understand the game more, helping me fight the Ender Dragon, or your direct financial contributions. It all helps. It all means so very much to me, so thank you for everything you've done for the past efforts, and thank you in advance for those coming forward. Looking forward to engaging in Macraft, that's the official name of the event, with all of you, Artimage. So that is his annual charity event on his Twitch channel for that hospital. I have gone to at least one of the Drunk Souls events in the past, and I don't remember if last year I was able to go and watch, but yeah, you should be able to find more information in the Discord. There's a link to that as well in the show notes. I will put his email in the show notes as well, and you can reach out if you have questions. I have not played Minecraft in quite some time.
I feel like, I mean, I've played quite a bit of Minecraft in my time, and I think it's going to be ambitious to do it in 48 hours. I think I've said in the podcast before, one of the best horror games of all time is Minecraft. Like, there is nothing scary. Like, the first time you are meeting, what's the Slender Man, Enderman, in a cave that you find in the middle, down below with maybe no torch or a torch. Super scary. The audio's great. But I don't know if I've ever been so scared in a video game than when I went into the Nether for the first time. It's so much work to get a portal up and to go in there. I've never seen the dragon, but once you're there, you are vulnerable. You might have diamond armor, you might have all the best stuff, but you fall into a lava pit and it's over, and it's just the most terrifying experience. So for those who, I don't know if I'll get to join him, but for those who go in and join him, I wish you well and good luck in the Nether, because I think it's
famously that is what Gwyneth Paltrow said to her accuser. I wish you well. I actually have never been to the Nether. There might
be two. There's the Nether, and there might also be another one where the Ender Dragon is. I don't remember how the structure is.
Okay. But... technically, I did walk through the portal. One of my sons built built all the things I guess you need to build to go there, and then introduced me to the Nether, and I don't think we played again. So I saw it, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, it's time for bed, kids. So... And with that, it's time for bed, kids. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for sending those emails to devgameclub@gmail.com. We'd love to see them. We also love your reviews. I get the Apple ones. Email us if you put them in somewhere else. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com, or you can find my co-host twitching at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
And are you still in the Final Fantasy VI Dragon run? I believe.
Yeah, I forgot. I actually
no updates from last week. So
no. I didn't get to do last week. I was out, and I forgot to tell people that I was out. But hopefully this week. Yeah,
I think you mentioned it on the podcast last week. So if they listened, they were good. And as I mentioned, we have a fan-run Discord. There's a link for that in the show notes. You can check out the whole community there. Lots of channels discussing episodes, but also just other topics as well around games. And other sort of fan culture. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, that Discord, our merch store, all the things by Mark Garcia. Have fun killing time at the shopping mall this week. And good night.
Good night.